Okay, Allison, recording in progress.
All right, I'm going to give us one more minute to get to our starting time. All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome back to everyone who joined us for our first plenary session. And welcome to those of you who are just arriving at Issues Briefing 2022. My name is Allison Hout, and it is my honor to serve as the president of the League of Women Voters of Illinois. So we're all glad to be here together, soaking up the energy and getting motivated to be advocates in our communities, to promote voting in our communities, to use all the methods that we have available to us to make change. Before we begin this morning, I just want to remind you of a few things: that our meeting is being recorded. Subtitles are enabled today. So if you would like to activate, enlarge, or end the subtitles, go to the bar at the bottom of your screen, and you can manipulate that through the live transcript box. Toward the end of our session, we'll have a question and answer period. So if you have questions along the way, please put your questions directly in the chat, and you'll put those in as a direct message to Question Asker. League members will be posing the questions to our speaker at the end of this presentation. We are pleased to have and would like you to welcome our American Sign Language interpreters for today, Vera Marie Baldoza and Molly Burke. And finally, an important thank you to the League of Women Voters of Illinois Board of Directors, the League of Women Voters of Illinois Issues and Advocacy Committee, co-chaired by Jean Pierce and Rosemary Heilman, and every person who was involved in putting together this fantastic week of education and advocacy for all of us. And now I'll turn it over to Jean to introduce our speaker.
Welcome to the second plenary of the 2022 League of Women Voters of Illinois Issues Briefing. This session will address how to combat election misinformation. I'm Jean Pierce, co-chair of the Illinois League's Issues and Advocacy Committee. Our speaker for this session is Peter Adams, who heads the education team at the News Literacy Project. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you, Jean. I appreciate it. I'm going to share my screen here, and I'm also going to share a link in the chat to a PDF copy of the slides that you should be able to download if you want to follow along via PDF. The animations on the slides and the videos won't ride along in the PDF, but that's an easy way to stay oriented. And then if there are other things folks are interested in afterward, we can work on getting those shared out. So let me make sure everyone can see my screen here. Does this look okay, Jean?
Yes, it looks great.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. So I'm thrilled to be with you all this morning. I've spoken to chapters in and around the Chicago area in years past, and it's something it's kind of become a highlight of my early spring. It helps me kind of gather my thinking around mis and disinformation and some of the things that I study and my team works on. So I can start by just telling you a little bit about the News Literacy Project. If you don't know who we are a national nonpartisan education nonprofit organization headquartered in DC, but we have staff all over the country. We work with teachers in schools all across the country and increasingly serve non-educators and the general public as well. And just to help everyone become smart, active consumers of news and information to successfully navigate today's information environment. If you want to learn more about the News Literacy Project, you can find us at newslit.org. We also have a viral rumor rundown blog. This is by no means a comprehensive collection of misinformation that's out there like some of the bigger fact checkers, but it is a selection of misinformation that the entries have takeaways similar to the ones that I'll be offering you during today's session. So if you're interested in what you can learn from examples of misinformation over time, then you can check out the Viral Rumor Rundown blog. This is at rumors.newslit.org. We also have a newsletter for the general public called Get Smart About News. You can subscribe at the link there. It's also in the PDF deck that I shared. And that is a weekly rundown of kind of the week in news literacy. So what are the big stories, viral rumors, and other pieces that we think are most relevant to staying on top of developments in the world of journalism, in the world of social media, content moderation, and relevant subjects. So definitely consider subscribing there. You can also see at that link archives of the newsletter, so you can see what you're getting into before you subscribe. My team and I put that out every week through the school year. So I want to begin my talk with just kind of the big takeaway. If I make no other point today, I want to make this point, that being news literate is really a civic duty. And that's my kind of frame for today's talk. And I have three reasons for that. Number one, information is the basis for our civic literacy, for our civic agency, and the basis for our civic action. Two, the public, we all are grappling with what is easily by many magnitudes the largest and most complex information landscape in human history. It's not even close. The amount of changes to our information environment over the last 15 years is just staggering, incomprehensible. And then third, I think the future of democracy depends on our collective ability to distinguish credible information from misinformation, and really to reestablish a shared set of facts in our republic. So for those three reasons, I am trying to make the point today that being news literate is a civic duty. So as I mentioned and touched on in the first support point there, information is really the basis for all of the decisions we make, civic or otherwise, and our decisions are the basis for our actions. And how I'd like for us to think about misinformation, or propose that we think about misinformation as kind of exploiting us at that first step and redirecting that process. So if you can be convinced of a falsehood or mistake something that's false as genuine, you might make a different decision, a less authentic or inauthentic decision based on that faulty information, and even take faulty action, whether that's voting for a candidate who really doesn't have your best interest at heart, or supporting a policy that is based on a falsehood. And so today we'll take a look at that moment quite a bit, when people encounter misinformation, why it appeals to them, and kind of what can result. And we'll also just kind of, I'm trying to try to draw into focus how complex the misinformation landscape itself is, how much misinformation there is out there, how it tends to circulate, so that we can start to draw some patterns into focus and really develop almost an internal system of red flags. If we monitor misinformation over time, it can be a really insightful and empowering thing. So misinformation really, I argue, exploits our most deeply held beliefs and values, our patriotism and love of country, our desire for equity and fairness in society, our love of freedom. And it uses those things to trigger strong emotional reactions, right? So those deeply held beliefs and values are the quickest pathway to a strong emotional reaction, and strong emotional reactions tend to short circuit our rational minds. So if we see something online, especially on social media, that makes us very fearful, or that makes us very angry, that makes us intensely curious or even hopeful, that can cause us to fall victim to our own cognitive biases. And of course, we're all vulnerable to a variety of cognitive biases, right? Our brains don't perform as well as we think they do, and we have to sort of train them and be mindful to avoid that. And as I pointed out, if once you're on that path, once misinformation is able to sort of hijack your decision making or your information consumption, it can actually redirect your civic activities and agency. So we are growing more and more polarized. This is something that the Pew Research Center, nonpartisan public opinion agency, has tracked over time. I'm waiting for the next update. They did this every few years up through 2017, but as you can see, from 1994 to 2017, the American population has become increasingly polarized. And I think a lot of that is due to our information habits, and a lot of that is due to the changes in the information environment that we'll be talking about. We're very far apart on key issues, especially gun policy, the role of race and racism in our society, climate change in the environment, entitlement programs that comprise a social safety net, and the issue of immigration. Those five really are above 39-point gaps in perception of seriousness. For example, things like whether or not it is, quote, a lot more difficult to be a Black person in this country than it is to be a white person. So how real an effect is racism in our society? We're very far apart on that question, very far apart on thinking that gun violence is a very big problem for the country, and so on. I think part of this has to do with a theory called the Overton window. And the Overton window was a theory that the parameters of acceptable discourse are sort of set by folks in the information space, both the media and news media, but also everyday folks now posting online, I would argue, are reframing topics of discussion and potential policy decisions as either established policy, like acceptable enough to be policy, popular enough to be strongly considered or to be considered sensible. And then there are things that fall outside of the Overton window, which might be too radical or unthinkable on both the left and right. And I think our perception of what counts as the center or what counts as a left-leaning idea or a right-leaning idea are in flux all the time. I think there are ideas that were considered centrist 15 or 20 years ago, which might be considered left-leaning today. There might have been things 15 or 20 years ago that were considered centrist that are considered right-leaning today. So these perceptions sort of shift over time, right? And I don't think it's an independent activity. I think there are people actively engaged in trying to make the case or normalize ideas that are falling just outside the window, especially folks on the extremist fringe on both the left and right are trying to sort of manipulate public perception, right? So if you can move something from an extreme idea to just a right-leaning idea, or an extreme idea on the left to just a left-leaning idea, you can try to shift that parameter of acceptable discourse over time. So that's part of what I think is happening to us now with our polarization and the fragmentation of our information environment. And I would actually argue that, or confess that I worry quite a bit about that window of acceptable discourse just fragmenting. If we see a day when we're so polarized that it's no longer a spectrum from acceptable ideas, policy, acceptable ideas on the left, policy, and acceptable ideas on the right as one contiguous spectrum, but we're so polarized that those spectrums of acceptable discourse become disconnected and pulled apart. And so I'll try to, I hope, give you a sense of how that could happen in the misinformation environment. And I want to start by touching on election misinformation from 2020 and 2016 as a way of anticipating what we might see in the midterms and we might see in 2024. So as everyone knows, in 2016, the Russian foreign state-sponsored disinformation actors were quite active in our election. They had hundreds of social media accounts that they controlled, posing as Americans. They created Facebook groups. They organized protests in American cities and states. and just posted inflammatory material. And a lot of what they were trying to do was just deepen that polarization, pull people already on the left, further left, pull people already on the right, further right, and really impugn the right to a left-leaning audience and impugn the left to a right-leaning audience, so to create division and animosity. In 2020, that really wasn't the case nearly as much. Certainly there were foreign state actors, Russia and Iran among them, active in 2020, but really for the most part, a lot of most of the disinformation and misinformation shared in the 2020 election was domestic in origin, and was a finding. And so here's some of the things that we saw in 2020 that I don't think are going away. Things like this. This is a picture of what looks to be two ballots accompanied by a claim on Facebook that they were in California sent to the same person with their names on both a week and a half apart. And it's interesting because if you look at the comments, you can see in the second comment, somebody said, look, I vote in California and no ballots have been mailed. This is fake. So someone's calling it into question. Of course, you don't know who that is. It turns out, and you can even read this if you zoom up on the image, these are sample ballots, not from California, but from Allegheny County, Pennsylvania. And so it's not evidence that someone was sent two ballots and could vote twice. And even if someone were sent two ballots, those of us that understand and have maybe worked in elections, as I bet some of you in this group have, know that only one of those would count anyway. But this is not evidence that someone was sent two ballots or voted twice. But that was the attempt. And another red flag here is the claim, number one, that Facebook keeps deleting this, and then the request to make it go viral. I think that's always a red flag. Someone says, the powers that be are trying to silence this stunning truth. Help me make it go viral. That's really one of those emotional appeals that I spoke about earlier. Here's another one. This social media post provides no purported evidence, so there's no photo with this, but it just says, red alert. A reliable friend of mine just finished poll worker training, and she texted me this. And if you're checking in at the polls and anyone happens to write anything on your ballot before they give it to you, or they put it in a voting machine, your ballot could be disqualified. Don't let anybody write anything on your ballots. In many polling places in many states, it's required for election workers to write something on your ballot. And so this caused massive confusion among some folks. And you can see how many shares this got. Now, this circulates, on or close to election day. That again is this emotional thing. People are thinking, look, someone is going to maybe disqualify my ballot. I don't want my ballots to be disqualified. I don't want those of my friends and family to be disqualified. And they hit share and like, which is so easy to do. And that winds up amplifying and boosting that. So this is an example of something called a sheer assertion. So there's no evidence whatsoever. This is just a text-based claim providing no other evidence. And it's also an example of something in internet parlance called copy pasta. So this is a copy paste rumor, which you can find that same exact text copied and pasted in a lot of different contexts across states. So this is something that was just copied and pasted by different folks. And it's very hard to know. In this case, Marcus posted this. Hard to know Marcus's motivation. It may well have been a good motivation. He may well have believed that this was something that could happen and wanted to warn others. Marcus could be a troll. Marcus could perhaps not be even in the United States. We don't know in this case. Here's a rumor that got shared and made its way to an influencer, to Eric Trump, showing someone burning ballots. And this person is showing some ballots that I think are sample ballots that they printed out, circled in Trump, and then burned the stack, and then posted this saying, here's a poll worker burning ballots. This video is no evidence at all that there was election fraud, right? Anyone could go to a website, print out sample ballots, and make a video like this with their phone and post it to YouTube or Facebook. But these claims, so again, they ignite, no pun intended, strong emotions and get shared. You can see the number of retweets and likes there. And you can even see digital analysts and fact checkers zoomed in on the video and actually pulled screenshots and mapped it against the sample ballot. So just in case you're wondering how they know. There were lots of claims like this. There were video feeds and screenshots of election workers doing their jobs, doing what they're supposed to be doing, and accompanied by a claim that in this case the claim is that they're filling out blank ballots. And these election workers were actually, again, this was fact checked, they were actually transcribing votes from ballots that had been damaged. So if there's a damaged ballot, election workers transcribe the votes to a new ballot and submit that ballot and destroy the other. So there were lots of rumors in 2020, and I don't think these rumors are going away. Here's another one that circulated, a video of what is sort of plainly somebody stuffing a ballot box. And the claim here, published in 2017, is that, look, this is from the 2016 election. Here's evidence of voter fraud. The Democrats are stuffing ballot boxes. Notice how they hurry and sneak. And it even has some captions in the video. This got 1 million views when I screenshotted this post. And on this particular share, it had been shared many times on many platforms. This is actually a video of a Russian polling place, just presented out of context. It's presented as Pennsylvania. Of course, there's no evidence that that's what it is. And the source here is just an ordinary user online. So this is a piece of user-generated content making a false claim. Sam Weinberg at the Stanford History Education Group showed this video and this claim to a group of high school students, and 52% of them said that this was strong evidence of voter fraud. So again, this study was in, I believe he did this in 2019. He published these results. 52% of high school students said this was strong evidence of voter fraud. And when he asked them using a computer if they could find the source of the video, only 0.1% of those students in that sample group could. And here's another example of purported evidence, right? Here's a photo, what appears to be a Trump rally. It is a Trump rally with people have their hands in the air. And you can hear, you can see how the claim is that this is a Nazi salute happening in Virginia. People who are critical of former President Trump, or who felt that his politics were far too far right, or he engendered far right sentiments in his crowds, would latch on to this photo and share it quickly. But this is not what's happening. If you go to the video of the event, you can see that people are holding up. I'll just let this play for a second.
You don't forget him. Thank you. Go ahead. What the hell?
People are chanting 4 more years and doing this. So in the aftermath of 2020, an organization called the Election Integrity Partnership published a report, and they identified some key takeaways, which I think are important and are going to remain relevant both in the midterms and again in 2024. So the overwhelming majority of election misinformation in 2020 was domestic. I think that will remain the case. They highlighted the fact that there are incidents that were captured on cell phones that turned into narratives. So an incidence of somebody seeing election workers filling out a ballot and not understanding what that was, and spreading that became a kind of narrative. So other people started looking for people writing on ballots and capturing that and posting it. And it started to feel like overwhelming evidence of something nefarious when it actually wasn't. And that turned into a conspiracy theory. And when a conspiracy theory is widely accepted enough, it just becomes conventional wisdom, just the way people think things are. Misinformation circulates in both a top-down and bottom-up fashion. So influencers with large followings, politicians themselves at times, share misinformation with a large audience and seed it and get it going. But it also comes from the bottom up. So, ordinary folks going to polling places with their camera phones, whether to, looking for election fraud, or seeing something they don't understand and capturing it and posting it to Facebook, and that working its way up. Both of those things were active in 2020, and I think that's going to continue happening as well. And then there were repeat spreaders, so really popular social media users who were committed to spreading election misinformation, and that was their purpose online. And I think you'll see that there are some very influential folks who are responsible for an overwhelming amount of the misinformation out there, not just about elections, but COVID and other issues. Here's one example of this, and I'll tweak the flow here just a little bit. I think drop the volume on this clip. So here's a video of someone in a Walmart shooting.
I never seen anything like this in my life.
Empty shelves in a cooler. And this circulated quite a bit as evidence that, there's widespread supply chain issues in the United States. We're going to all go to the grocery store and not be able to find things. That Walmart in Dixon City, and I think this person was genuine. They didn't understand why there was no food in the cooler. They'd probably heard this narrative of supply chain problems. They'd seen a lot of rumors, people shooting empty store shelves with their phones. So now anytime someone sees an empty store shelf, that is already in place to help them interpret the event. But there are dozens of these rumors online where stores were changing something out. In this case, they had a refrigerant leak and they were repairing those coolers. So I think, these incidents can become narratives which inspire even more incidents, right? So once someone starts to look for poll workers writing on ballots, or they start to look for empty shelves at Target in one section, they find more of them and post more of them. And then it starts to look like a body of evidence from these accounts online. So I think that's really something for all of us to reflect on and pay attention to a bit, and in terms of what we think about evidence. The same is true of gas prices. There have been lots of rumors about high gas prices. Of course, gas prices are up especially from over the course of the pandemic. The reduced demand over the pandemic caused gas prices to drop pretty precipitously over the last couple of years. And then some supply issues, and now most recently, the conflict in Ukraine has caused gas prices to go back up. But there are lots of rumors that are taken out of context. This is one of them. You can see these prices gas prices are high, but they're not this outrageous. This was actually a gas station that was under construction, and it's quite common when you have a sign that's functional in a gas station that's under construction to post outrageously high prices so people don't try to pull into the lot and buy gas before it's open. So that was presented out of context and went pretty massively viral. So I think there's actually a lot we can learn about what to anticipate election-wise just by looking at recent examples of misinformation. And I am going to pause for questions in the middle so we can take a few, and then again at the end. But let me just work through some of these examples really quickly. And I want to highlight some trends and then what I've called targets for each group, just to highlight kind of what sort of motivates folks to do some of this stuff, or to either create it or share it, and then how it works, what it's targeting or what it's after. So I think one type of misinformation that circulates is posted by people who are just looking to get large social media followings, to get lots of likes and shares on their posts. And there are lots of reasons people do this, just for fake internet points, but also if they can get an account with a large following, they can sometimes sell that account and to someone else and to repurpose for another purpose. So, accounts with large followings actually have monetary value, and there's a market for those. And sometimes they inspire hope and curiosity. So there's a lot of this going around right now with the invasion and war in Ukraine. Pictures of President Zelensky in Ukraine in military fatigues. This isn't during the Russian conflict. That's actually from April of 2021 when he was visiting some troops there. There are lots of sensational videos here. Here's one of someone being mocked up in makeup. This is actually from a movie set in 2020. Sorry, that's loud. Let me fix the volume. Apologies. So here's a clip from TikTok, if you are familiar with the video sharing platform TikTok, of Ukrainian soldiers, or what appear to be Ukrainian soldiers, saying goodbye to their girlfriends or spouses. This got massive engagement. You can see 877,000 likes and almost 16,000 comments, lots of shares. And it went viral across platforms. So here it is on Facebook and Twitter as well. Same video, same claim. And it's powerful, right? It's emotional. It's appeals to people who want to do something about the situation in Ukraine, who want to express support. But it's actually from a documentary that was shot in 2020. So these are actually Ukrainian soldiers. They are actually saying goodbye to loved ones. But this is before the Russian invasion, and you can find this on YouTube as well. It's been recently uploaded to YouTube, which might be part of the reason that someone mistook it for having to do with the current conflict. This Time magazine cover went viral last week, but it is a fake. It's the work of a digital artist and a graphic designer. But again, it felt good to people to condemn Putin and to like the idea that Time would do a cover like this, maybe, and share it. And this sort of went across platforms. The designer himself sort of posted about it and said, my artwork has gone viral, but a lot of people thought this was an authentic Time magazine cover. And it's very easy actually to make a fake Time magazine cover. There are even generators online that help you do this. And now when that image appears on Twitter, it gets a label that it's manipulated media. So I think social media platforms are doing a better job of catching on to things that are false or manipulated or doctored or presented out of context going viral and labeling them pretty prominently. And I think it's important for all of us to pay attention to those labels when we're grazing information online. Another trend is disinformation. So disinformation is information that has a political goal, that you can tell that it's intentional. Often that goal is to divide people, to polarize people, as I already mentioned, to confuse people as to what's really going on. And this is a big goal right now of Russian disinformation about the situation in Ukraine. A lot of false equivalency or whataboutism. They say this, other sources say this. Who knows what's really happening on the ground? Or attempts to kind of show or build a false consensus or to exaggerate support for a policy. So here's an infographic, not just about Ukraine, but about airstrikes elsewhere. This circulated again last week, and it went viral among a lot of young people, saying, look, the world's paying attention to Ukraine, but there were also airstrikes by Israel in Damascus. There were Saudi airstrikes in Yemen, and there were US airstrikes in Somalia, all within the last 48 hours. Let's condemn war everywhere. And it's, I wonder in the chat if anyone has any ideas or what you notice in this infographic, if there's a detail that you're curious about. If you came across this, kind of take me through your thought process here. Anyone in the chat, if you came across this, what your thoughts might be? Or questions you'd have?
Rosemary, are you getting any?
No, I don't have any.
Okay.
I could have created a quick poll, but I don't think
That's
we have
okay.
time.
I just wondered if folks had seen this, what their thoughts might be if they came across it.
One person, Kathleen said, I would Google it up to see if anyone else is reporting it.
Oh, and I see one says, looks like Russians have bombed the entire area. And another person says, everybody's doing it, maybe not so bad. Oh, and another one, now it's coming in, US airstrikes.
Yeah.
And one person said, no sources cited, that's a flag.
Mm-hmm.
And people are asking what's redfish or
Redfish. Yes,
yeah.
So good. So redfish is one detail that we have here. And I think this is actually, accurate claims. There are airstrikes that are happening in various places, not on the scale they are in Ukraine, but some of the kinds of sentiment that, this evokes, right? This is happening everywhere, not just in Ukraine, is actually a perfect example of disinformation and Russian propaganda. So here's what I would do if I saw this and was wondering about redfish. Let's just take a look. This is just a Google search we would do, right? If we just search redfish, I have their homepage. But of course, their homepage is only going to be of limited use to me, right? So redfish is gonna, so look, in the shadow of the Cold War, the US destructive role in Guatemala began with a CIA coup to overthrow democratically elected leaders. There's British racism and a scandal. Colombia's false promise of peace. This is some of the other stuff published on redfish. You know, the enemy within, neo-Nazis in Germany, Spain's housing crisis. So like all of these countries and their issues. So I want to go to their about page here and just take a look. But I actually don't learn a lot, right? So it's a multi-award-winning digital content creator, which specializes in short and in-depth documentaries in collaboration with people involved in grassroots struggle worldwide. Okay, that doesn't tell me really who they are. But a good policy here is to get off of the page. So I wouldn't expect Redfish Media's about section to say, hey, we're actually pretty unreliable or something like that. So what I did was do a search for Redfish Media, and then I limited my results to news. You can see at the top. And here's a Vice piece that comes up, Vice News piece. And if I click on that, I may not have time to read the whole thing. So I'll hit Control F. Well, I noticed right up top that it's calling it a Kremlin-backed media outlet. And if I hit Control F and just search for Redfish and pop through the instances of it, they use the tagline objective but not neutral. Okay. I want to keep going here. Redfish is made to look like just another progressive media company. But here's the graph I'm interested in. Social media companies have labeled it a Russia state-controlled entity, and it's continued to grow with over the last 4 years. So this is actually kind of sneaky Russian state-sponsored propaganda. And Russia has become very, very good at this, sort of masking content that they put out there, and it goes viral in a number of different ways. Of course, I think people are now much more familiar with RT, which used to be called Russia Today, and they rebranded it as RT, so it's even less obvious, whose tagline is to question more, right? Question the official stories you're getting, to just, again, underscore their attempt to just draw things into question and create confusion. So there are actually, 7 that I've tracked, Russian state-sponsored, state-controlled news media. And again, these are news media that have no editorial independence from the state and the Kremlin's goals. So they will not refer to the, quote, invasion of Ukraine. They will not refer to the war in Ukraine. And of course, yesterday, the Russian parliament passed a law making it illegal for anyone in Russia to describe the conflict as an invasion or a war, or to describe it in ways that conflict with the official government statements and narratives. So even individuals on social media can be arrested. Western news organizations are pulling people out of Russia. Some, I think the Washington Post announced this morning that their Russia coverage will not have bylines so that people won't be prosecuted for this. But they're very good at creating these sort of sneaky entities like Soapbox and Redfish, and In the Now. They had a trendy video channel called ICYMI, which is internet parlance for in case you missed it. And they just sort of push polarizing things, some true stories about, so example, the CIA was active in the 50s in Guatemala, and there's a history there, but they're focusing on that and drawing attention to that for specific goal and specific purpose. So this infographic actually made its way across the internet, and it was embraced. There are a lot of credible maps and infographics that are out there. Here's one from The Guardian showing conflict that, at a glance in your social media feed looks similar. And it's hard to be mindful and have the presence of mind to say, where is this coming from? How is this different from the other one? But here's how this infographic then made its way from Facebook and Twitter and other places onto platforms like TikTok. On the left, you'll see here's just, powerful music playing as a video. So here's just a still shot of that redfish. Again, this is Russian state-sponsored propaganda, now just making its way to TikTok. And also, this is very TikTok, people dancing. So, you know, the one on the right just has the content from the infographic, but not the infographic itself. So now it's even a further step removed. So if I saw this, I don't even have redfish or any indication, any starting point if I really wanted to interrogate that. It's hard to know where that came from. So seeding the information environment with things like this can have really hard to trace effects downstream. Here's another example of a piece of misinformation. This isn't Russian state-sponsored, but this went viral in late February. You know, we serve pork, we don't serve sheep, so take off the stupid mask. And, you know, it's again an appeal to emotion. People who are fed up with masking or think that mask mandates are an overstep either of their freedoms or they're an overreaction to what is not that substantive of a threat, some people feel. You're all familiar with those debates, I'm sure. So that, you know, helped this really go viral, and people were saying, good for this, you know, I'm going to go there and buy barbecue just to support them because they published this message, but they didn't publish that message. That's a fake photo. It's a doctored photo. In fact, you can find the same photo from the same barbecue spot in North Carolina with lots of different political messages, some of them offensive, like the one in the center. And, you know, calling someone a fat pig is not civil. So lots of those kinds of messages, and it turns out that it is something you can manipulate on a website online. You just generate your own message. It looks very convincing. I just typed in "don't fall for fake signs you see online," and it makes it look like that was on the sign. And of course, you can see the same two cars in the background, the very same image every single time. So be aware of that. Text on signs, text on T-shirts, texts like this. This is a screenshot of what is purportedly a statement from former President Trump. He has released a number of statements quite regularly. He has sometimes used all caps and hyperbole, but this is a fake. So he did not call Mike Pence weak, but this screenshot went viral as though it was authentic. Here's a fake quote. Fake quotes, of course, are internet notorious, right? There are lots of fake quotes on the internet. In this case, putting Voltaire under here, again, and back to our conversation about the Overton window and trying to make extreme ideas more acceptable. This was actually a quote of a white nationalist whose name I can't remember offhand. We fact checked this. This is something that you know, is actually an anti-Semitic reference. The idea that there is a Jewish cabal sort of running the earth, and a very heavy theme among white nationalists, reskinned as a poignant Voltaire quote. And it was actually shared by a congressman out of Kentucky who didn't know that this was originated with a white nationalist. Here's another screenshot similar to the Trump statement, but a CNBC headline that's doctored. So when you see something like this, that there's no link, just a screenshot, be wary. It's very easy to manipulate text, including text on T-shirts. So here are two celebrities with bold political statements on their shirt. On the left, the actor Sylvester Stallone. There are four useless things in this world: a woke person, a COVID vaccine, Anthony Fauci, and Joe Biden. It's a real shirt, you can buy it. On the right, Ben Affleck, another actor, losers in 1865, losers in 1945, losers in 2020, comparing Trump supporters to Nazis and Confederates. Both have been doctors. So here are the authentic images of these actors. And it's very easy to just Photoshop a T-shirt design onto someone, and then to use that celebrity to, again, draw attention to the shirt. At times, this might be a political endeavor and an attempt to spread intentional disinformation. And sometimes this is opportunism to spread marketing for those T-shirts. There are also attempts to overstate support for causes. So here's a protest, video of a protest. This person says in the Netherlands, purportedly against mask mandates. It was actually a protest against gas extraction, the expansion of gas operations in this town, and everyone turned out. And so they're exercising their civic voice is actually being presented out of context as support for something that they never supported. So that's another really important trend to track. I want to pause here because I've thrown a lot out, and I know I'm moving quickly, but I want to pause and make sure that if we have a couple of questions, Jean, that we could take them at this point and take a pause.
Thank you. One question was, it seems as if all the examples have to do with photos and videos. If people tried to ignore visual content or never accepted it as proof, would that help?
Probably, if everybody just read a couple of, like, a local newspaper and a national newspaper every day, yes. But unfortunately, you know, as you all probably know from being on social media is a visual platform. And as people's attention spans shrink and their tolerance for text and a length of text shrinks, they really just want to see pictures. I mean, look at the prevalence of Instagram over Facebook, for example, among younger people, or TikTok. These are 15, 20, 25-second videos, highly visual, highly engaging. And then you keep moving. So I think, you know, these platforms are designed for visuals. The platforms are designed for quick reaction, and they're designed to keep you engaged. That's why they're free, right? So they want to see what you react to serve you more of it, to keep you on platform longer. And the longer you're on the platform, the more ads they can serve you. And the more things you interact with, the more they can learn about what pushes your buttons and better target you with ads, which is their value proposition to advertisers, right? So it's all of a piece. But yes, I agree. Visual misinformation is, you know, feels compelling. We're also all hardwired to believe our eyes and ears. So because evolutionarily, right? If you see something coming, a threat, you're going to react. People see something, it feels like evidence. If you see a photo of something and someone's telling you it's election fraud, or they're telling you it's the president of Ukraine fighting a war, or they're telling you, you know, that it's something else, your instinct is to believe it. And unless you have the habit of mind to sort of stop, pause, and say, okay, wait, how do I know that's really what it is?
Okay, I have quite a few questions if you want to take some. Okay, Karen wants to know, if one sees false or misleading posts on Facebook, what is the best way to handle it? Should you comment that it's wrong and provide correct information, or are you just giving them more algorithm strength?
That's a problem. So that's a really good point, actually. So the more engagement a post gets, the more the algorithm, whether it's Facebook or Twitter or TikTok or anyone else, says, oh, this is an engaging piece of content. I am going to upgrade it in my algorithm and make sure more people see this piece of content. And so there's an argument to be made not to. And I've seen disinformation scholars and social media experts make that point and argue that case. You should report it, flag it, which sends it to fact checkers, which kicks in eventually the labels saying this is manipulated media, or our fact checkers have determined that this isn't true. And then there are folks, and I would probably count myself usually among this camp. If there are 1,000 comments, my one comment saying, hey, here's a link to a fact check is going to do more good for folks seeing it and glancing at the comments than it is bad in giving that incremental boost to the algorithm. So that's where I fall on it, but that's a legitimate debate. But definitely you can report it. If you know the person, you can message them privately so you don't embarrass them and say, hey, you know, that thing you posted, I understand maybe why you did and you felt it was important, but it's actually fake. You might want to think about pulling that down. And then if it's someone you don't know, just offering a comment, again, civilly, right? You don't want to say that people who fell for this or were duped by it are deficient in any way or mock them, but just say, oh, you know, I see why people might believe this is true, but it's actually not. And here's a link to a fact check or two laying out why and how we know that.
Okay, Jean, you have a question?
Yes, Melissa submitted this one. Is there a single non-biased website someone can go to verify sources like Redfish and all, who they are, what their agenda is?
Yeah, so I would say that yes, there are highly credible standards-based sites. I want to no human enterprise is without potential bias, right? But that doesn't mean that everything is equally biased. So I would say that standards-based news sources that actually verify the information they produce, they think about things like fairness. They have usage standards for words that are, the AP style, for example, evolves to be fair, to think about the way it's most accurate and fair to refer to things, are the best places to go. And here's why. And you don't have to rely on the reputation, say, of Vice News. In the case of Redfish, you could find that information being reported across outlets, and you could drill down and say, well, how does Vice know this? Who did they talk to find out? So trustworthy information doesn't actually ask you to trust it. They don't say, trust us, Redfish is Russian propaganda because we're Vice News, we say so, thanks. They will report out the story and actually show how they know that Redfish is associated with the Kremlin, and then you can make that determination and keep reading. So again, I think a lot of fact checkers have been maligned as biased unfairly. I think most of the major fact checking websites, including Snopes, but not limited to Snopes, PolitiFact, Lead Stories, Fact Check. Reuters Fact Check is phenomenal. USA Today has a wonderful fact checking division that's growing. They do high quality fact checks, but none of them actually ask you to trust them because they are fact checkers. They show you where the photo originated years ago and why it can't be from last week. So they're actually not asking for your trust. So look for that transparency and look for sources that show their work.
Okay, Lara wants to know, is TikTok regulating false information at all?
Yes, they're actually making strides. They were slow to do it as a new platform, but they're doing more and more moderation. They're pulling down accounts, false accounts, accounts that push misinformation, and they're offering some corrective information. I think they can do much more. A lot of people are arguing that, social media accounts, for example, have the data. They know who has seen something. They know who has liked or shared a piece of misinformation. So there are folks who are advocating, for example, that if you like or share a piece of misinformation, Facebook should let you know, right? Once its fact checkers determine it's false, you should get a notification saying, hey, just so you're aware, you shared a thing that was not true. They don't go that far, but they're doing some things. So I think staying on top of social media companies and that policy debate is really important. So let me move on. Oh, sorry.
I'm just going to, before we move on,
Yep.
Vera, and also if Molly's listening, if you could tip your screen just a little bit so your head is closer to the top of the screen and we can see your hands a little better.
Oh,
Thank you. Sorry about that.
I can't see myself when I'm sharing my slides. So
Yeah,
okay.
Right.
My hand.
So,
Okay.
yeah, thank you. Sorry.
Okay.
To
No problem.
Okay.
No problem. So another trend I want to highlight is conspiracism or conspiratorial claims, conspiratorial thinking. And the target here really is a kind of simplification of complex issues. So conspiratorial thinking tends to boil complex realities like a global pandemic caused by a microorganism. Is very hard for us to understand. By a virus, how could this happen? How can viruses jump from an animal to a human? How does that even work? What are variants? Why does that work? How could it shut the world down? So it's much easier to believe that this was intentional and that this was part of some design rather than it just unfolded the way it did. So, a simplification of a complex issue is appealing. It's much more appealing to believe that there is a cabal of people controlling the election outcome or controlling some other aspect of our lives. It gives us a very good and bad, good versus evil scenario to latch onto. And the communities online that form around conspiracy theories give people a real sense of belonging and a sense of like special exclusive knowledge that appeals to them. This is starting to happen with Ukraine. So conspiracy theorists sort of migrate from one global event to the next, from the election to the pandemic, now to Ukraine, saying that, this is staged. So here's a video of a reporter. You really can't see his name. It's in German. And you can see that it's saying that the fake makers screwed up on air, that somebody came and, somebody moved and had to have their quote unquote body bag fixed. This is actually footage of a protest about climate change. The protesters were trying to make the point that climate change is a threat to the planet. It's going to cause massive loss of human life unless we change something. And that was their protest. But taken out of context, then you can say, oh, look, the fatalities in Ukraine are being staged. And that's what Spriter 99880 was trying to push here, and got decent engagement on that post for it. That same clip, by the way, was used to say that the pandemic was being staged. But this gets turned on its head. So the conspiracy theorists also take standards-based sources like ABC News. This is an authentic video of firefighters battling a building that had been shelled, a civilian building, an apartment building, residential building that had been struck by a missile, and said, look, those are from a gas explosion in 2018. ABC, essentially accusing ABC News of doing what conspiracy theorists and purveyors of mis and disinformation do all the time, which is taking something out of context. It's not, but it's enough of a seed of doubt for people to doubt ABC or draw it all into question, right? How do I know anything is true? And that's a real danger. If you wanted to verify that ABC News clip was what it says it was, you could drill down on it. You could look for that same footage in other standards-based sources. But also, if ABC News took something out of context like that and it got through to air, it would get quite a bit of coverage in the days following when it was exposed. Here's another instance of that. And again, this person saying, look, are they using video game footage? Are they using movie footage? These are the exact tactics that purveyors of disinformation use, but they're accusing standards-based news sources of doing it and just causing a lot of confusion and really fatigue, I think, among folks who are trying to figure out what's going on. This happened recently with CNN. This is actually just a rumor that CNN reported that one of its journalists was killed in Afghanistan in August of 2021, and then reported the same person was killed in Ukraine. But these aren't authentic CNN accounts. These are made up CNN accounts. Anybody can copy the CNN logo and use it as their profile image on Twitter or another social media platform. And you'll notice the handle, CNN Afghan, is not an authentic CNN handle. It doesn't have a blue check. It's not verified. But again, in the moment as people are grazing, it might seem so. And then this person, at least purportedly, fell for it if they're posting in good faith, put these two side by side. And you can see the effect on the comments. This guy is actually a video gamer, a prominent video gamer, and the gaming community likes to try to dupe people into thinking that he's somebody he's not, and they put his picture on the internet and then laugh. But the downstream effect is that people say, look, the mainstream media is the enemy of the people. CNN is lying to people. This has nothing to do with CNN. This person's not a CNN journalist. CNN never posted anything about him, but it reinforced this person's impression of the mainstream media, and people shared it. And so you can see how the cumulative effect of these kinds of false claims can turn people away from standards-based sources of information. Here's another conspiratorial post: the idea that our DNA was being collected by COVID tests, which is absolutely false. And so I just wanted to highlight with this study the effect and the sprawl of QAnon beliefs. The PRRI, the Public Religion Research Institute, I believe is the full name, is a nonpartisan public opinion polling firm, and they released a study at the end of February that found that about 16%, almost 1 in 5 Americans, still believe that in the core tenets of the QAnon conspiracy theory. And they polled people on these 3 things: whether the government, media, and financial sectors are controlled by a group of Satan worshiping pedophiles. This is the core of the QAnon belief, who run some kind of global child trafficking operation. Far too a shocking number of people embrace that idea and think it's true. That there's some kind of storm or reckoning coming where this group will be outed and punished is actually shockingly prevalent. I'm not sure if you've seen it in your feeds. And then because things like this have gotten so far off track, true American patriots have to resort to violence. And this is where the conspiratorial thinking becomes quite real, right? That so when people are so moved by what they see and believe online, that they're moved to action and to violence, it becomes very real. It might seem all like a game or like something people indulge in their online worlds, but when people develop strong beliefs around those, they take action. Here's another example, but this one's false. 65% of the country does not believe that the 2020 election was fraudulent. This is just a made-up number. So this is from an ordinary user online posting a meme, and I thought these two examples kind of next to each other was an interesting contrast. One has a methodology, one has a name attached. You can actually look at the questions they ask people. You can look at their sample size. You can look at their margin of error. The other is a meme with some stats posted by an ordinary person you don't know. But it takes on a kind of veneer of truth. Again, numbers and data sort of feel substantive even when they're manufactured and made up, and just put on a random picture of a crowd, it feels authentic. So circling back here, just to home in on some of those key takeaways again, and knowing what to expect. And I think, again, even though a lot of what I showed you was not related to election misinformation today, these takeaways stand. The majority of this stuff is circulating domestically. Foreign actors are trying to amplify it. There are still foreign actor, disinformation actors who have accounts posing as Americans, who are amplifying things, seeding things. But we are largely circulating this domestically among ourselves. Watch out for this idea that incidents turn into some kind of evidence, becomes a narrative, which sparks more evidence collection and develops into either a conspiracy theory or just gets adopted as conventional wisdom, that it circulates from the top down and from the bottom up, and that repeat spreaders or influencers play a big role. Some other things I wanted to just draw into focus for us as we wrap here to a close. We have about 10 minutes left. Is that right, Jean? I don't want to go over. Okay.
Yes.
So keep in mind that misinformation is really exploitative. So even if a piece of misinformation seems to reinforce your political perspectives and beliefs and ideas, it actually does damage to them. It actually diminishes them. And it's exploiting you and your beliefs and your values to get you to be an unwitting sharer and amplifier of those ideas. Misinformation also migrates across platforms. So this is something that's really relevant in social media content moderation debates. No matter how hard TikTok cracks down on misinformation, no matter how quickly they pull a video down, recordings of that video will then pop up on Facebook and on Twitter. So just pay attention to that as you're browsing. Screenshot of a tweet on Facebook, a recording of a TikTok on Twitter, a Facebook post screenshot on Twitter, an infographic that somebody saw on Snapchat or on Twitter posted to TikTok as a video. So that's happening a lot, and it makes content moderation very slippery and hard because it's just falling through the cracks and people make slight alterations. So even if there are algorithms that are catching the same false image, it gets through. Most misinformation is very cheap. So it's not, there was a whole sort of debate for a while about how big of a threat deepfake technology is that could really convincingly doctor videos. It's shocking technology, but the vast majority of misinformation is just people taking a picture of a crowd from 2017 and saying this is 2022. It's that simple most of the time, mostly because that's incredibly easy to do. Right-click on an image, copy it, put it in a social media post and give it a new context. That's something that takes 2 seconds to do, and it takes somebody 20, 30 minutes at least, if not an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours to fact check and write a fact check entry debunking it. So it's not a fair fight between the fact checkers of the world and the purveyors of misinformation. It's much quicker and easier to just pump as much false stuff out as they want if that's their motivation. And then again, a lot of people who wind up amplifying and sharing that don't realize that it's false. And it's made with a lot of motive. So you shouldn't think that every piece of misinformation is the work of the Russians, or that every piece of misinformation that you see your relative share on Facebook is pernicious, or that they knew it was false. A lot of people are genuinely trying to share information that's good. They're genuinely trying to draw attention to things that are of concern, that outrage them, that worry them. But some people pushing this stuff are just doing it for money. Some people are doing it for laughs. Some people are doing it for fake internet points. And some people have real political goals in mind. And a lot of misinformation is designed to generate or is accompanied by messaging that's designed to generate distrust in standards-based news sources. The media won't report this, but here it is. You know, usually if there's a shocking scandal and somebody says no media are reporting this, number one, if you do a Google search, you may well find media reporting it. My question to those folks is always, if no one's reporting on it, how do you know about it? But number two, if no one in fact is carrying the news story, that's probably an indication that there's something shaky about it and it may not be true. Another thing to remember is that our own biases get in the way. So we like to think that we're, you know, neutral observers of the world, that we have a good sense of what is left-leaning and what is right-leaning, because of course we're the center somehow, or we have a good bead on the center, but that's really not true. Our own biases deeply affect the way we perceive news coverage, the way we perceive information in our social media feeds. We engage in motivated reasoning. We have a bias toward our experience of the world. And you know, we tend to think that our experience is an authoritative experience and how other people experience the world, and that influences the way that we evaluate information as well. It's a really good idea to just slow down. Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow, is a good reminder of this. It's kind of system one, system two thinking. When you're just grazing through Twitter or Facebook or TikTok, your brain is kind of on autopilot. It's on system one thinking. Without sort of stopping to say, wait a second, how do I know this is true? How do I know where that photo came from? How do I know what was being burned in that bag were actual ballots? Who posted that? That's system two thinking. So being mindful when we're online and trying to engage in slow thinking when we see something that resonates and when we see something that is affecting our civic perspectives on an issue is really important, and to reflect on our emotions. Asking questions like, where did this come from? Is this really evidence? Really be wary of screenshots. If there's no link to a news story, but a screenshot of it, be wary of that. If you can't see the context, be wary of that. And follow misinformation over time. You will see patterns emerge that help you, again, develop that system, internal system of red flags. And a quick Google search like the one I showed you on redfish can be your best friend. And just keep in mind that quality journalism is a process. So folks tend to think, well, you know, journalism isn't perfect, therefore anything's as viable as anything else. It's really not about trusting the press as much as it is trusting the process that quality news organizations adhere to. It doesn't mean they're perfect, it doesn't mean they don't make mistakes, but it means they do have a process to sort of catch those errors and correct them and be accountable for them, and a set of values that they embody that leads to, you know, information that is far more credible than user-generated stuff online. I think that's the best way to kind of think about the difference between user-generated content and standards-based content. They're kind of in two different information universes. We have to ask two totally different kinds of questions of these kinds of content. So having one approach to everything you see online can really go wrong. So we have some steps that we recommend. This is actually captured in an infographic that we have here called How to Know What to Trust. This is linked in the PDF. So if you click on this, you should go to the webpage that hosts that. And then I've left some other resources here that you can take a look at. Visit our For Everyone page on our website. Check out our infographics like Is It Legit? If you're trying to evaluate a source. If you want some distillations of misinformation, a lot of the themes I hit in this talk are in this infographic. Tips to really up your search game. Tips to engage people who've shared misinformation without starting a showdown. So if you want to correct someone or post a fact check, but you don't want to start a big fight, check out that infographic. And again, those are all linked as well. And consider subscribing to the newsletters that I mentioned. And we have a mobile app, so you can practice some of these things. If you download that, you'll find that at informable.newslit.org. And we have a podcast. And I wanted to leave time, I'm sorry, for a couple more questions. I didn't mean to go right to the end here, but I'm happy to stick around for as long as we have to chat more about questions.
Thank you. I saw that you mentioned that there are resources about how you respond to mis or disinformation. I was particularly concerned about a whole lot of very well-funded disinformation regarding the graduated rate income tax that came through on a number of ads that appeared on channels which have, standard-based news, but these were ads.
Right.
Any recommendations for how to counteract this?
Well, I think, when you're looking at an ad, to realize it's an ad, and that even if it's an ad that appears on the website or on a channel of a standards-based news source, it doesn't mean those standards are in effect for that ad, right? So checking the claim with an independent source, and trying to figure out where the claims in the ad came from, if they attribute them at all, or you can Google those claims if they come from a highly partisan or controversial think tank, for example. That might be of less value to you than something that's produced by a nonpartisan office.
Rosemary, you have questions?
I do. Some people have been asking for links to those fact-checking organizations. Are they in these slides if they go to them, or on your website? Or
they are not on our website at the moment. Let's see. If you go to rumors.newslit.org, I link to a lot of them. But if you search, and I can just, there is something called the International Fact-Checking Network, IFCN. And they have signatories, so they have a list of standards and values that people have to sign on to and get vetted to be a member of it. International Fact-Checking Network, ICFJ. You can check out. Let's see if I can pull up their website. You can check out their website and their signatories for fact checkers all around the world who sign on to their values. Some of the ones I rely on most. Reuters fact checking, if you just Google that, you can go to their homepage. USA Today has a really fantastic fact checking division. And leadstories.com is a quite good fact checker. PolitiFact, Snopes does some really good work as well. Really don't deserve the reputation they've gotten among especially partisans. So there are a variety. And again, a high quality fact check doesn't ask you to trust it because of its name. It shows you evidence, it shows its work, and that's really the substance of it.
all right, well, we have a couple more minutes. Claire wants to points out that newspapers, even though we think that they're more even-handed, actually also have slants. How do we evaluate printed information for bias?
So yeah, bias is a whole other topic. I actually do a whole different talk about bias. And again, our own biases get mixed up in it. So I would separate out the reputation of a news source with the substance. So evaluate it for yourself. I think for the most part, mainstream standards-based news organizations in general, but I think especially newspapers, try very hard on the editorial side, on the straight news side, to minimize the influence of bias, to really present relevant, accurate information in a fair manner. And that's the aspiration. I think the public has this idea that newsrooms have a sort of secret agenda that all the reporters have or all the editors have, and that they consistently spin a story left or right. I think, and that's something that every journalist I know just sort of laughs at, because it's really, that doesn't reflect the reality of a newsroom. Journalists take their values and standards, very seriously. It doesn't mean that bias doesn't creep into stories, but I think it's more the product of blind spots, people's lived experiences, not knowing what they don't know, making assumptions without realizing it, and framing a story a certain way, than it is an intentional manipulation. There are, obviously media sources out there, I don't know that I would call them news organizations, that are just there for partisan spin and partisan interpretation. But I would distinguish those from standards-based sources. And, I would encourage you to make those determinations, again, yourselves. I'm sure everybody's seen these media bias charts that say, well, this is left of that and this is right of that. watch NBC, watch ABC National News, watch CBS, and see if you can really discern a difference. Read the New York Times and read the Wall Street Journal and see if you can see a difference in their straight news coverage. You're going to see differences on their editorials. You're going to see differences on their opinion pages, but really make those determinations for yourselves and separate that from the rhetoric would be my advice.
Okay, and it looks like it's 11:44. So Jane, do we want to?
Okay. Thank you very much, Rosemary. And thank you, Mr. Adams. I think we've learned a lot about this important issue. And thank you to our League members and Friends of League for staying engaged and informed. We're going to try again with our brief poll. So please stick around for a couple minutes to complete it before you take a break. And then join us at noon for our third plenary, Dealing with Disruptions at Public Events. Thank you.